Hello, everyone. Recently, the NATO military alliance has made an unprecedented decision regarding Ukraine. They have announced that they will provide up to $40 billion in annual aid to Ukraine. This can be considered a significant diplomatic success for the president of Ukraine, as it is an enormous amount of money, enough to sustain the war that Ukraine does not want to surrender. As you may recall, about 3 months ago, NATO countries considered providing $100 billion in aid to Ukraine. This is a colossal sum, and it was estimated that it would help Ukraine sustain the war for about 3 years if the pace of the conflict and the consumption of weapons continued as in the past 2 years. Additionally, the United States has also approved a $90 billion aid package, most of which is allocated to Ukraine. This makes Ukraine even more confident in this war. However, the initial plan has now undergone some changes. Instead of providing $100 billion to Ukraine, NATO is now calculating aid on an annual basis. For the upcoming year, it will be $40 billion, and future years may be adjusted as necessary. They will not provide excessive aid if they see that the war is not effective or that their money and weapons are not being used efficiently. Despite this, it still poses a significant headache for Russia, as Russia also has limited resources and cannot launch a massive offensive to completely overwhelm Ukraine. Therefore, what will likely happen is that the war will drag on, and both sides will suffer severe losses. Currently, Russia has had to use weapons from Iran and North Korea. Recent information suggests that Russia may also use North Korean soldiers for logistics and combat, indicating that Russia has also expended a considerable number of its own troops. As for Ukraine, it is safe to say that they have run out of available weapons from their national stockpile. Almost everything they have now comes from aid. For instance, last month when their weapon supplies were depleted and Western aid had not arrived in time, Ukraine almost had no defense capability. Wherever Russia attacked, Ukraine retreated. Things were so dire that President Zelensky appeared in the media daily or contacted NATO leaders to call for swift support. Now things have stabilized. The West has supplied Ukraine with a large amount of weapons, including medium-range missiles that enable Ukraine to strike back into Russian territory, shoot down and destroy glide bomb depots before they can take off and bombard Ukraine. The West has weapons, Ukraine has people, and together they are still resisting Russia. Meanwhile, Russia has North Korea and Iran, and also receives economic support from China. Therefore, this war shows no signs of ending soon, especially with NATO's announcement of a $40 billion aid package, an amount sufficient to buy weapons for another year of warfare. How will Russia address this issue? Objectively speaking, NATO consists of many economic powerhouses. Thus, supporting Ukraine with $40 billion is not a significant burden compared to their multi-trillion-dollar economies. On the other hand, Russia alone must deploy troops and weapons to counter the $40 billion worth of aid that Ukraine receives. Russia also incurs enormous costs, even though there are no official statistics. Even if we assume Russian weapons are cheaper, transporting troops to distant battlefields, managing logistics, and the inherent higher costs and casualties of an attacking force compared to a defending force are significant. Therefore, Russia likely spends at least $20 billion and possibly $40 billion or more in its war against Ukraine each year. As a single nation, and not an exceptionally wealthy one, tens of billions of dollars is a substantial amount, especially as the Russian economy continues to suffer under Western sanctions. Hence, the longer this war drags on, Ukraine will undoubtedly incur losses, but Russia will also suffer heavily. Perhaps the biggest beneficiary might be China. However, waiting for Ukraine to surrender seems quite unrealistic, given the substantial aid it receives, and Ukraine's allies do not want that to happen. They have the money. The only question is whether Ukraine has enough soldiers to continue fighting. As many commenters have noted, the West seems prepared to support Ukraine until the last soldier. Don't know if this support is good or bad, but it will undoubtedly prolong the conflict for a very long time. Recently, the German Chancellor made a statement that Germany opposes and does not accept a ceasefire in Ukraine. Specifically, the Chancellor said that Russia's ceasefire terms would lead to Ukraine's surrender, which Germany will never support. In fact, the peace measures proposed by Russia are all aimed at prolonging the conflict, and we will not allow this to happen. Another notable point is that the German Chancellor also stated that they will not directly intervene in this war. As we mentioned earlier, Germany is ready to fund Ukraine to fight until the last soldier. Germany does not want Ukraine to surrender, but they will absolutely never use their own people in this brutal war. Currently, although money and weapons are relatively abundant and foreseeable in the future, Ukraine faces a significant problem. There are not enough people willing to fight. Perhaps one day they will indeed only have the last soldier left. Specifically, since the war broke out in February 2022, thousands of Ukrainians have illegally crossed the border to evade military service. Immediately after President Zelensky signed a decree banning men aged 18 to 60 from leaving the country. The number of people attempting to cross the border is expected to increase in the near future, following the Ukrainian authorities' recent approval of a new military mobilization law, allowing the country's military to recruit more soldiers and impose harsher penalties on those evading service. A young photographer shared that, through friends who had previously fled abroad, he would be supported by some online brokers to escape the country with a service package costing around $8,600. He explained his reason for fleeing. "I was not born to participate in warfare. I was not born to kill people, even if they are Russians. I would not survive on the front lines. I want to build a family and see the world. I am not ready to die." The Ukrainian military is currently facing a severe manpower shortage, as the conflict has entered its third year, with no end in sight. In the early days of the war, hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian citizens volunteered to go to the front lines to defend their country. However, many of them have been killed, injured, or are simply exhausted, forcing the Ukrainian military to recruit from those who are hesitant to take up arms. In response to the need for more soldiers, President Zelensky passed a controversial law in April, lowering the conscription age from 27 to 25. Additionally, those who evade the draft will face severe penalties, revocation of their driver's licenses, freezing of bank accounts, and confiscation of property. Over the past 2 years, approximately 20,000 Ukrainian men have left the country to avoid being sent to the battlefield. Some even attempted to swim across rivers and tragically drowned. The head of the Ukrainian border guard reported in June that 40 people had died attempting to swim across rivers since the conflict began, but the actual number of casualties could be higher as some bodies were swept away by the currents. Ukraine is ramping up efforts to prevent border crossings and draft evasion, including tackling corruption in the recruitment process. In August, President Zelensky fired all provincial recruitment officials after reports surfaced that military officers were accepting bribes to help young men evade service. However, it is widely acknowledged that completely eradicating this issue will be very challenging. So if Ukraine's perseverance continues to wane, Russia might have a chance at victory once Ukraine runs out of soldiers to fight. In reality, the Ukrainian military only needs to dwindle to a certain level before it becomes incapable of continuing the fight, rather than waiting until the very last soldier. But when will that happen? No one can predict. Thus, both Russia and Ukraine find themselves in a stalemate, with the war dragging on and both sides suffering heavy losses. What do you think should be done? Russia has no intention of withdrawing its troops. Ukraine does not want to lose any territory, and the West is determined to continue its financial support. Thank you for watching the video. Please leave your comments and subscribe now to never miss a video, and let's learn together. See you again.